Hello, our topic in this presentation is the correct way to calculate a secondary progressed chart. This is probably going to take 2 or 3 videos. We will see, because there's a lot of information here. I've worked out the details of this. This is something that I've been working on for years, and it's now come to a new level of clarity and with some new information. So what I'm going to present builds on information that I presented in 2 previous videos. You do not need to go back to those previous videos. You can just jump in here. You can watch these videos in any order. It doesn't matter. But what I'm doing here is the latest information. It's taken me some time to put all this together and document it clearly so that we can understand this. It's very important because when we do secondary progressions, and most of us in modern Western astrology, we use secondary progressions. I use them. They are part of the system of astrology I use called Vibrational Astrology, and they are part of most modern Western systems of astrology. They work, they're important, but there are some issues about how to calculate them, and we have new evidence and new information that strongly suggests that we should be using what are called fractal progressed houses, and we need to use what's called the Bija Correction. And I have some new information in this video on the results you get when you combine both of them. There's something else also called Anomalistic Correction, and I will talk about that as well. Let's dive into this, and we will learn about all this terminology and exactly what's going on. Okay. First of all, the 2 previous videos. I made a video called Fractal Progressed Houses and the Fractal Primary Chart in August 2018, and a second video called the Bija Corrected Secondary Progressions that was made in March 2021. And again, you do not need to watch these videos before watching this one. Those videos do complement this one very well, and you can watch them in any order. So if you want to dive deeper and deeper into this, you can watch all 3 videos. And all 3 also stand alone, so they're complementary. If you want to watch the other 2 videos at astrologydc.com, they are in the Progressions, Directions, Transit, Cycles section. So you'll see one of the buttons is called Progressions, Directions, Transit, Cycles. I'm making this video in August 2021, and that's how it's set up at this point. The Astrology DC will be evolving and developing, but it should be pretty obvious. All 3 videos will be together in a section, probably with that name far into the future. Okay. And as I mentioned, this video is going to present some new ideas that are not in those previous videos, and it pulls it all together. So let's review, and in reviewing, we'll get some new perspectives as well. So this is review, but with some added ideas and perspectives on this. Let's review the basic issues that we're dealing with that can cause this secondary progressed chart to be calculated a little bit inaccurately. Let's build it from the ground up. Number 1, secondary progressions are very important in modern Western astrology. I already mentioned that. And they are important in VA as well. So this is a very important predictive technique. Number 2, everyone agrees what the basis of secondary progressions is. It's a day equals a year. So for each day after life, it's lived out in a year. So one day after birth is lived out in your life as a year. A day equals a year. Very simple. Point number 3. If you use the formula, a day equals a year, and you don't doctor it up, you don't fiddle around with that, and you just say a day is a year, simple, don't play around, that's it. Well, how fast do the house cusps move in the progressed chart if you just say a day equals a year? Well, we know as astrologers that house cusps move all the way around plus a degree. They move 361 degrees in a day. And if a day equals a year, therefore they move 361 degrees in a year of life. That's the fact. House cusps move 361 degrees. I think the next slide, the next slide gives an example of it. So on the left is a chart calculated for August 22nd, 2021 in Gainesville, Florida at 7 hours, 5 minutes, 15 seconds. It's an arbitrary date and time and place. It's just a chart. Fine. Let's go a day later. August 23rd, 1 day later, same exact time, 7 hours, 5 minutes, 15 seconds, same place. Well, what happens? Oh, actually, this time was the moment that the sun is conjunct the ascendant at 29 Leo 35. That's how I came up with that weird time. So it happens to be sun conjunct the ascendant. What happens exactly 24 hours later? The ascendant moves about 1 degree from 29 Leo 35, 1 degree later, slightly less than a degree in this case. It'll vary, 0 Virgo 25, but it's not actually 1 degree. It's spun all the way around, 361 degrees. Of course, the sun moves about a degree in a day and so on. Moon moves about 13 or 14 degrees on average in a day, etc. So it's a day later. Okay, so it's moving, the cusps are moving 361 degrees. And by the way, if you want to measure it the way astronomers do it in a way that's more consistent, with how we think of a day, you can put the sun on the midheaven in right ascension. Notice this label here says right ascension natal chart. If you're not familiar with this terminology, don't worry about it. But right ascension is an alternative way of measuring where the planets are in the sky. It's a little different from the normal zodiac longitude we use. And the best way to define a day is from when the sun is conjunct the midheaven, there's the 10th cusp, all in right ascension, to 1 day later. And what you will find is that it will take very close to 24 hours. In this case, the sun is conjunct the midheaven in right ascension at 1 hour, 32 minutes, 19 seconds p.m. Here it's actually 15 seconds earlier, 1 hour, 32 minutes, 04 seconds. It'll usually be within about 30 seconds of time. So if you do the sun conjunct the midheaven in right ascension, and then come 24 hours later, the sun will be conjunct the midheaven within about a half a minute. It's the most constant and close to 24 hours. Just to let you know, it's a little technical detail if you're interested in this. What is a day? And actually, we're all interested in this because this is one of the primary problems with secondary progressions is what is a day? A day to human beings is 24 hours. Okay, and we can define a day as the time that the sun is conjunct the midheaven in right ascension to 1 day later. And the cusps will have moved 361 degrees in 1 day. By the way, if you're curious, here's the series software with a chart wheel up here. If you want to put the chart in right ascension, it's pretty simple. Just go to Settings, Coordinate System, and then right ascension. And if I click on that and I click OK, right ascension natal chart. And the planets will move typically a few degrees, sometimes a little bit more. I have a bunch of videos on astronomy for astrologers that explains what right ascension is and so on. We're not going to get into that right now. But what I wanted to emphasize, I'm going to just go back to the normal chart in case I look at this again. I want to bring it back to our normal way of doing it in astrology. So what I was going to say is that, if you want to learn more about right ascension and so on, you can watch those videos on astrology for astronomy for astrologers that I made. But that's the you might say the best way, the most consistent and clear way to define a day is that it's 24 hours, and over a year, on average, it'll take 24 hours, within 1 minute of that, for the sun to return to the midheaven in right ascension. Okay, now, oops, I don't want to show that. I want to come back here. Okay, back to this slide. Okay, so if we use the formula, a day equals a year, house cusps move 361 degrees in 365 days. They're moving about 1 degree a day, but we don't want that. We astrologers don't want the houses to move 361 degrees. We want them to move 1 degree. So, in one way or another, we remove the 360 degrees and we make believe the cusps move 1 degree a year, because that's what we want. Why do we want it? Because as astrologers, we notice that events tend to happen when an aspect occurs that number of degrees from the house cusp. So looking at my chart, Neptune is 10 degrees above the descendant. So when I'm about 10 years old, I will have a Neptune 7th house event occur, where Jupiter is 30 degrees from the midheaven. So when I'm about 30 years old, there'll be a Jupiter midheaven event. So we know from observation that there tend to be experiences in our lives when we equate about 1 degree to a year of life. The question is exactly how do we do it? And there's been the thought that the secondary progressed houses must actually move 1 degree a year, not 361 degrees a year. Okay, just reviewing that. I mentioned that in the other video as well. Let's move forward to the fourth point, is that astrologers have come up with many different ways to force the houses to move 1 degree a year. And some of these, the most popular one used nowadays is called Naibod, or more officially Naibod and Right Ascension. Some people use Solar Arc. And so if we go into Sirius software and we select progression, a progressed chart, here are the choices. Time, which is 361 degrees a year instead of the 1 degree, and so on. There's the Solar Arc, there's the Naibod, that's very popular, and various things called quotidians and PSR, which is used for solar returns, some specific things. The most common ones used are the Solar Arc, the Naibod, and I'm suggesting Fractal House is the one to use. So you should select Fractal House, and I do describe that in more detail in the video that's about fractal houses. But all we need to know about it for our purposes right now is that the fractal house idea applies day equals a year twice. So if we say a day equals a year, what we're saying is that the ratio of a day to a year is 1 to approximately 365.25, and we repeat it. So if we say a day equals a year and then we apply it again, we get 1 to 365.25 times 365.25. You end up with about 4 minutes of time equaling 1 day. If you don't follow that and you want to follow it, you can watch the other video. But for our purposes right now, all we need to know is that the fractal progressed houses is a beautiful idea. I mean, theoretically, it's very attractive because we never leave the idea of a day equals a year. We don't have to introduce some additional idea. We just say a day equals a year. And then we do it in the fractal way. The way fractals are made, they call it an iteration, is you do the same thing over and over again. So you say a day equals a year. Well, if a day equals a year, you can take that year, which is now a day, and then apply it again. So you apply it twice, you end up with approximately a little bit less than 4 minutes equals 1 day. And how far do the houses move in 4 minutes? About 1 degree. So I believe that to get the progressed houses to move 1 degree a year, all you have to do is apply a day equals a year twice. Now I go into that in much more detail and take about a half hour to explain it all in a separate video. But it's very simple. We just do a day equals a year twice. So it's an elegant idea. We don't have to introduce anything else. Astrology is fractal. We use this idea of fractals throughout vibrational astrology. It's consistent. It's simple. You could almost derive it logically that this would happen. Okay, so there are two problems with secondary progressions. One that we've been talking about is how do we get the house cusps to move 1 degree a year instead of 1 degree a day? And as I explained, that's been solved. We can do that by assuming that astrology is fractal. I mean, it's pretty obvious that it is if you're a vibrational astrologer anyway. And we say as above, so below. That's already a fractal statement. And we just apply the fractal idea of iteration. We do it twice, and there we go. So I believe that the progressed houses that move 1 degree a year is the next fractal level of day equals a year. And it's convenient to put that next fractal level, applying day equals a year twice, as your progressed houses, because then you get the very powerful houses moving 1 degree a year. If something's moving 1 degree a day, it's only going to affect you for a day or two. But moving 1 degree a year, it's powerful. It's moving about the same speed as the progressed sun. Powerful, so it makes sense to do a secondary progressed chart with the fractal progressed houses. So all you do is just select fractal progressed houses and you have it. So that, at least theoretically, is beautiful. We can apply the idea, see if it works, and I talk about that in the other video, and it does appear to work well. Now the second problem is this. What is a day? And what is a year? And the answer to those questions might seem obvious, but the definition of a day that is normally used, like if I say, I'll see you tomorrow, exactly 1 day later or something, it means 24 hours. A day is 24 hours. We all know that. So the time of 24 hours makes sense in our lives because about 24 hours later, the sun will rise. And as I showed in those other slides, the most consistent time is not when the sun rises, but when the sun reaches the midheaven, measured in right ascension. It'll be very, very close to 24 hours. It'll be within about a half a minute, less than 1 minute definitely, it'll return. Whereas the time it rises or measured in longitude can vary more. Okay. Anyway, a day is obviously 24 hours. But is that the definition we want to use in astrology? And the answer is no. We don't want to use that. That's called a solar day. And I'm going to explain why. And the reason why is because to use a solar day is not consistent with the underlying theory of how astrology works according to the theoretical framework, at least that I use, and that we use as a standard in the system of vibrational astrology, but you can use it in any system. We have a theoretical framework for how astrology works, and according to that theoretical framework for how astrology works, we should not use the solar day. And this is why. Our idea in vibrational astrology is that astrology is built upon fundamental forces of nature, that astrology is not only divination. It is not only like a magical language. It's actually built out of fundamental natural forces of nature. Now, that's just the theory, just an assumption, maybe right, maybe wrong. But if we use this theoretical framework, we use these assumptions, we see what the conclusions are and how it works out. And if it gives us useful information and helps improve our interpretation, and I believe it does. Well, one of the most fundamental forces of nature is called spin. The Earth is spinning on its axis. Okay, so that's important. That makes night and day. The Earth revolves around the sun. We all know this. That makes the seasons. So our day and night is created by one kind of spin, the rotation. And revolution around another object is also regarded as a form of spin. It has what's called in physics angular momentum. So spin is just a word. It's the best word we've been able to come up with, and it's not a perfect word. But spin means angular momentum, this like rotational motion and movement and energy. So both revolution and rotation are forms of spin. What's amazing is not only does the Earth spin on its axis, not only does it revolve around the sun, that's what all planets and all solar systems do. They revolve around a star. The galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, it looks like spirals. It's also spinning. The stars are spinning around the galactic center. It's like everything is spinning around something. The moon is spinning around us here on Earth. And even the subatomic particles have a quality called spin. It's not a physical spin, as currently understood, but it has angular momentum. It has this quality of like a rotating force. So spin is fundamental to nature. And what we're saying with secondary progressions is that the spins are resonating with each other. They're connected to each other. So what we're suggesting is that every time the Earth spins on its axis, it resonates with the Earth revolving around the sun. That all these different levels of spin are interconnected. They're not separate from each other. They resonate with each other. That's the basic principle of astrology. That things are resonating at different levels. This fractal integrated relationships. This whole connected order of life. So, in the middle of the second paragraph, I have here, the concept of secondary progressions can be viewed as a simple proposition based on the fundamental principles of resonance and spin. This is elegant. Occam's razor, which means just don't make things any more complicated than you have to. Maybe life is just simple. Don't add anything in that's needed. Just with this simple proposition that spin is fundamental, that's already, understood. That's a basic understanding of modern science. Spin is fundamental. And in astrology, we just add one more idea, that all those spins are resonating, connected, integrated. Therefore, voila, you have secondary progressions. And in accordance with modern thinking, that resonance of the spin of the Earth with the revolution of the Earth around the sun, that they're resonating, they're integrated. They are like different dimensions of the same phenomenon. Therefore, somehow the ancients figured out that a day equals a year. This is very consistent with our understanding of the nature of reality in modern times. And that understanding of the nature of reality, it's logical, it can be analyzed, it's also mystical, and to some extent, it can't be completely understood by the human mind. All these ideas, time is a fourth dimension, time and space are actually one thing, but they don't make sense to our minds in everyday life. There's some mystical interconnectedness. That's what quantum theory tells us. That's what relativity theory tells us. That's what astrology tells us. It's all pointing in the same direction. Each just one integrating, resonating wholeness, oneness. That's what causes secondary progressions. So it's simply as clear as it's always been stated. A day equals a year. And therefore, what the basis of secondary progressions, based on this vision of what astrology is and what the nature of reality is that we live in, is simply day means one rotation of the Earth. So really what we're saying is one rotation of the Earth, one spin of the Earth resonates with, is lived out, is equated with one revolution of the Earth. So now we know what day means. Day means one rotation of the Earth, and year means one revolution of the Earth. It might just sound semantic, like, oh, okay, duh, that's obvious. But now let's look at it more closely and think about what one rotation actually means. What does it mean for the Earth to rotate one time? The first thought is, well, one rotation is 360 degrees, not 361 degrees. And I'm going to make this point even stronger. Let me show you a video that I found. It's called Sidereal Day versus Solar Day by a James Donahue. It's a very short little video on YouTube. I'm going to play this because it does a beautiful job of showing you the difference between the Earth spinning once on its axis, which is called a sidereal day. So the Earth spinning once, just one spin. If we say that one rotation of the Earth is equal to one revolution of the Earth around the sun, it right off the bat, one rotation is 360 degrees, not 361. This will become even more compelling as we watch this. Let's watch this video. On the left is the sun, obviously. On the right is the Earth, obviously not drawn to scale. This is for learning what a sidereal day versus a solar day is. And in this video, the Earth is going to spin around, and let's watch what happens. I'm going to play this video, and the Earth will start spinning and revolving around the sun, which of course is what it does. There it is rotating around, and while it's rotating, it's revolving around the sun. Now I'm going to stop it right here for a moment. You see what happened. As the Earth is rotating and one day is happening, it's also revolving around the Earth. So one day later, after the Earth has spun around exactly 360 degrees, it is not facing the sun. Obviously, that's why it takes one more degree. It takes 23 hours and 56 minutes. 23 hours, 56 minutes, 4 seconds approximately. I've seen different numbers of seconds given by different people, but a little bit more than 23 hours, 56 minutes, the Earth spins once on its axis. And then it takes another 1 degree for the solar day. That's the day we use because we want to get up in the morning. So our day is related to the sun. So we'll continue. I'll continue this video, and he'll show it spinning around that 1 additional degree. There it is. I'll stop it there. And that's the solar day. And 1 extra degree takes another 4 minutes and puts us at 24 hours. So the sidereal day is 23 hours, 56 minutes. The solar day, the day we humans use, is 24 hours. Now, what I'm saying is this. The foundation of astrology is very simple. It's simply resonance. That one spin of the Earth resonates with one revolution of the Earth. To use a solar day is actually more complicated. It's a combination of the rotation of the Earth with the revolution of the Earth around the sun. See what I mean? Let me say it again. That 24 hours in a solar day is combining the rotation of the Earth with the revolution of the Earth. And our principle is very simple. We don't want to combine them. They are 2 separate spins. The spin of the Earth resonates with the revolution of the Earth. It suggests that we need to use a sidereal day. Now, the term sidereal day can bring up some confusing associations in your mind. You might think, well, if I'm using a sidereal day, does that mean I should use a sidereal zodiac? No. Whoa. Sidereal zodiac, they're both related to the stars, but it's just because you hear the same word in 2 different contexts doesn't mean you want to use the same words consistently. I mean, words are just labels for things. What we want to use is consistent principles. And what I'm saying is that everything that we think about related to how astrology works says we should be using a sidereal day, not a solar day. 1 spin of the Earth equals 1 revolution of the Earth. Okay, let's go back to our PowerPoint. And, excuse me. So, just to repeat, in astrology, we typically use a solar day. Best way to measure a solar day is noon to noon, based used in right ascension. Anyway, it's 24 hours. But based on vibrational astrology theory, a sidereal day makes more sense. More specifically, in astrology, we use a mean, an average solar day. The actual solar day, by the way, just so you know, an actual solar day is not exactly 24 hours, as I mentioned before. It varies from 23 hours, 59 minutes, 38 seconds to 24 hours, 0 minutes, 30 seconds. So a day it's only an average day is 24 hours. And we set our clocks to an average day. But the actual solar day varies by about a half a minute. And I've already explained how we measure a solar day. It's when the sun in right ascension is conjunct the midheaven in right ascension. That will vary only about a half a minute from 24 hours. And here, if you want to read more about this, here's a website that explains it very nicely, explainingscience.org, blah, 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 blah. There's the full website address. And this explains why the length of a day changes over a year. But one simple way to be aware of is that here's the path of the Earth. It's exaggerated the ellipse. It's actually not that thin, but it is an ellipse. And when the Earth is close to the sun, at what we call perihelion, it's moving faster. You know this when you look at an ephemeris, or you look at the speed of the sun in your chart. The sun varies in speed. It's moving fastest when it's at perihelion and slowest when the Earth is at aphelion. So it's actually the speed of the Earth, obviously, that we're doing it. From the Earth's point of view, it looks like the speed of the sun, but it's the speed of the Earth. That's obvious. So anyway, the speed of the Earth varies because it's in an elliptical orbit. It's also affected by the tilt of the Earth. So that's our day is going to be affected by how far the Earth moves. So a day is not 24 hours. It varies slightly off 24 hours. But interestingly, the sidereal day is constant. The sidereal day is constant. So the fact that we're going to use a sidereal day has, good luck for us because it's constant. So we don't have to worry about, should we use the actual length of the day or the average? That is an issue if you're using the solar day. With the sidereal day, it's not an issue because the Earth spins on its axis at an extremely constant speed. It changes about 1 second every 500 to 600 years. That's a rough estimate. Astronomers actually don't know exactly, but somewhere in the range of 500 to 600 years, a day will actually change. Instead of being 24 hours, it'll be, I forget if it's speeding up or slowing down, but anyway, it'll change. And there's also little fluctuations within that as well. So, and it's not completely known exactly how much it's speeding up or slowing down in the past, but it's about we could say 2 seconds every millennium. So 1 second isn't going to make any difference in our calculations. So even if you're doing predictions for countries or something else that's like older than the lifespan of a human being, for our calculations, sidereal day is constant. Just letting you know all these details so that when we use a sidereal day, what I'm saying is this: we should not use a solar day. We need to use a sidereal day, and fortunately a sidereal day is constant, so we don't have to be concerned about speeding up or slowing down like we do with a solar day. And there is a question, if you use a solar day, whether you want to use an average speed or the actual speed, it would change the calculation slightly. Okay. So, now one rotation of the Earth can be measured either against the tropical zodiac or the fixed stars. Astronomers usually do it against the fixed stars. and that's called a sidereal day. But there's no significant precession of the equinoxes in one day, so we don't need to be concerned about it. Okay, so you can think of the spin of the Earth as just one spin, either relative to the tropical zodiac or relative to fixed stars. It won't affect the calculations of the secondary progression, because if you're 100 years old, we're only moving 100 days. There is not a significant amount of precession of the equinoxes. So whether you're measuring between the fixed stars and the zodiac doesn't matter. Bottom line is this. If you don't care about all those technical details, you do care about the conclusion, is that if we use the formula, a sidereal day, not a solar day, equals a year of life, it's very well defined, it's not ambiguous, we know how long that is. Okay, so we don't need to be concerned about it. I have a note here on this slide that even though we don't need to be concerned about it, we do have a theory in VA for what creates the tropical zodiac and the sidereal zodiac. I've made videos to explain where the sidereal zodiac comes from. It's generated from resonances between the cardinal points of the tropical zodiac with the galactic center, so the tropical zodiac is more fundamental. Therefore, the spin of the Earth in relationship to the tropical zodiac is more likely to be what we should be measuring, but it doesn't matter. If we ever reach, the reason I'm explaining this is this, if we ever reach a point in time where we're doing forecasting for some very long period of time or for whatever reason, my guess is that we should measure the spin of the Earth relative to the tropical zodiac. If it should ever come up, with every technique we're using now, it doesn't make any difference whether we consider a day to be the spin of the Earth relative to the tropical zodiac or the fixed stars. So bottom line is this, we know what a day is. The day is clearly defined. It's a sidereal day. When we do a day equals a year, we should use the sidereal day. I'm going to stop here. We're already at 37 minutes, and I will continue with the second part of this video on the correct way to calculate secondary progressions in a second video. Let's stop here. Thank you very much for listening, my friends. God bless. Namaste.